I have covered geopolitical crises for a long time. I have watched governments collapse, wars ignite, economies detonate. I have seen moments that analysts described as historic and then watched them fade into footnotes within a year. I am telling you right now, with complete clarity and without any dramatic exaggeration, that what happened in the last 24 hours is different. This is not a crisis that will fade into a footnote. This is the moment that every security analyst, every energy economist, every nuclear strategist has spent decades modeling and hoping would never actually arrive. 3 things happened. Each one alone would be the defining news event of the year. Together, in the span of a single day, they constitute something that does not have a comfortable name in the existing vocabulary of international relations. Let me take them in order, not because the order matters for drama, but because the sequence reveals the logic, and the logic is what should terrify you. Hormuz is closed. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway between Iran and Oman, approximately 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, carries roughly 20% of all the oil traded on the planet every single day. Not 20% of Middle Eastern oil, 20% of global oil. Every barrel that moves from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, the UAE, and Qatar to the refineries of Asia, Europe, and beyond passes through that choke point. There is no alternative route that can absorb that volume. There is no pipeline network that can replace it on short notice. There is no strategic reserve anywhere in the world large enough to cover an extended closure. Iran closed it. The immediate market reaction was exactly what every economist predicted and every government feared. Oil prices did not gradually climb, they detonated. The moment the closure was confirmed, the price per barrel surged past $150. That number is not just an energy statistic. It is a civilization-level economic event. Every product that requires transportation, which is every product, becomes more expensive within days. Supply chains that were already fragile from years of disruption begin to fracture. Inflation, which governments across the Western world have spent 3 years trying to suppress, roars back with a force that monetary policy cannot contain. The closure of Hormuz is not an energy crisis. It is a global economic weapon, and Iran just pulled the trigger. Donald Trump walked in front of cameras and delivered an ultimatum that I have not heard from any American president in my lifetime. He did not issue a diplomatic statement. He did not convene an emergency UN session. He did not call for multilateral negotiations. He looked directly into the lens and told Iran that if the strait was not reopened within 48 hours, the United States would systematically destroy every power plant and every piece of oil infrastructure inside Iranian territory. Every power plant, every oil installation in 48 hours. I want you to sit with the weight of that statement for a moment before we move to the second event, because it is easy to hear an ultimatum and process it as rhetoric. Politicians make threats, leaders, posture. This is the ordinary background noise of international relations. But this statement is not rhetorical background noise. This is the President of the United States, on camera, giving a sovereign nation a 48-hour countdown to choose between compliance and the systematic destruction of its civilian and industrial infrastructure. The clock is running as you watch this. Whatever happens when it expires will define the next decade of global order. Now the second event. And this is where the word unprecedented stops being an exaggeration and becomes a precise technical description. Iran fired ballistic missiles at Dimona. For those who need context, and I want to be precise here because precision matters enormously, Dimona is a city in the Negev desert in southern Israel. It is also the location of Israel's Negev Nuclear Research Center. Israel has never officially confirmed or denied possessing nuclear weapons. But every serious intelligence agency on the planet, every arms control organization, every strategic analyst with access to satellite imagery and published research agrees on what is at Dimona. It is the physical heart of Israel's nuclear capability. The reactor, the processing facilities, the infrastructure that underpins the most sensitive military asset in the entire Middle East. Iran fired missiles at it. Some of those missiles were intercepted by Israel's layered air defense systems, the Iron Dome, David's Sling, the Arrow system. But not all of them. The systems were overwhelmed at specific points in the saturation attack, and some warheads reached their targets. Over 100 people were wounded. The physical damage to Dimona's facilities is still being assessed. Israeli officials have not yet disclosed the full extent of what was hit, but here is what does not require assessment. Here is what is already clear with absolute certainty. Iran just demonstrated that it can penetrate Israel's most sophisticated air defense network and deliver ordnance to the location of Israel's nuclear infrastructure. It did not destroy Dimona. That may not have been the point. The point may have been exactly what it appears to be: a demonstration. A proof of concept delivered at maximum psychological volume. A message transmitted not in diplomatic language, but in the language of ballistic trajectories and overwhelmed interceptor batteries. The message is this: we can reach your most protected place. We can hit what you have spent decades hiding and defending. And if we choose to do so again, with different warheads, the consequences for the region and the world will not be recoverable. Every nuclear strategist understands what happens when a country's nuclear infrastructure is threatened with destruction. The doctrine of deterrence, the theoretical framework that has prevented nuclear war since 1945, is built on the assumption that both sides can absorb a first strike and still retaliate. The moment one side believes its nuclear capability is at serious risk of preemptive destruction, the rational calculus shifts. The incentive to use those weapons before losing them becomes, in the cold mathematics of deterrence theory, overwhelming. This is called the use it or lose it problem. It is the scenario that keeps every serious defense analyst awake at night, and Iran just staged a dress rehearsal for it, the third event. And I described this one last not because it is least significant, but because it is the one that breaks the psychological frame most completely. The frame that said this conflict had geographic boundaries, that it was a regional war with global implications, rather than a global war being fought across regions. Iran fired ballistic missiles at Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia is a coral atoll in the middle of the Indian Ocean, approximately 1,800 kilometers south of the southern tip of India. It hosts one of the most strategically significant military installations on the planet, a joint United States and United Kingdom base that has served as the launch point for B-52 and B-2 Spirit stealth bomber operations across multiple conflicts, including both Gulf Wars and the opening phases of the Afghanistan campaign. It is the base from which America projects air power across the entire arc from East Africa to Southeast Asia. It was, until approximately 24 hours ago, considered operationally invulnerable to Iranian attack. The distance alone was supposed to make it safe. The technical requirements for a ballistic missile to reach Diego Garcia from Iranian territory were supposed to exceed Iran's demonstrated capabilities. Iran's missiles reached Diego Garcia. They were intercepted before causing significant damage to the base infrastructure. But the interception is not the story. The story is the trajectory. The story is that Iran just demonstrated publicly and irreversibly that the base the United States believed was beyond reach is within range. That demonstration does not expire when the interceptors succeed. It is a permanent addition to the strategic calculation of every military planner, every alliance partner, every country in the region that hosts American forces or allows American aircraft to use its airspace. And at the same moment that Iranian missiles were tracking toward Diego Garcia, a commercial vessel in international waters off the coast of the United Arab Emirates was struck and disabled. The vessel's flag, cargo, and crew are still being confirmed, but the geography of the attack communicates what the official statement will eventually confirm. The Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, that have quietly hosted American logistics, provided airspace access, and facilitated the military campaign against Iran, are being told something very specific. Your cooperation has a price. Your coastlines are not protected by American guarantees. Your shipping lanes, your ports, your towers of steel and glass in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, all of it is within our reach, and all of it is at risk if you continue to serve as the platform from which we are being attacked. This is the architecture of total pressure. Not a single front with clear lines and identifiable flanks. A simultaneous, multi-vector assault on every node of the system that America and its allies depend on. The energy choke point, the nuclear deterrent of the closest regional ally, the forward operating base in the Indian Ocean, the commercial shipping that sustains Gulf economies. Iran is not fighting a war on a battlefield, it is attacking the infrastructure of an entire global order, and the 48-hour clock is still running. I want to be honest with you about what I do not know because in a moment like this, the space between what is confirmed and what is speculated is exactly where dangerous decisions get made. I do not know what Israel will do in the next 24 hours. I do not know whether Trump's ultimatum is an operational commitment or a pressure instrument. I do not know whether Iran has calculated that Washington will not execute the threat or whether Tehran has decided the cost of compliance exceeds the cost of absorbing American strikes on its energy and power infrastructure. What I know is that these are not abstract questions. They are operational decisions being made right now by governments that have already demonstrated they are willing to act in ways the world assumed were permanently off the table. There is also a dimension almost nobody is discussing. The countries that will suffer most from a prolonged Hormuz closure are not the United States and not Israel. They are Japan, South Korea, India, China, and Southeast Asia. Economies dependent on Gulf oil for 40 to 80% of their energy. The closure is not primarily a Western economic problem. It is an Asian civilizational problem. Beijing, Tokyo, Seoul, and New Delhi are not passive observers. Their calculations about whether to pressure Tehran, back Washington, or pursue independent de-escalation will shape the outcome as much as anything happening between American and Iranian military assets right now. China, in particular, occupies a position of extraordinary power in this moment. Beijing is Iran's largest trading partner and a primary purchaser of Iranian oil that flows through the very strait now closed. China has the relationship and the incentive to push for de-escalation, but it also has reasons to observe the damage a prolonged closure inflicts on American allies. Beijing's silence since the closure was announced is itself a form of communication. What I know is this: the Strait of Hormuz is closed, and the global economy is already absorbing the shock. Dimona has been targeted, and the logic of nuclear deterrence has been stressed in a way it has not been stressed since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Diego Garcia has been ranged, and the concept of an untouchable American forward base no longer exists. A commercial vessel has been struck, and Gulf states are receiving a message that requires no translation. The 48 hours Trump specified are not a diplomatic timeline. They are the interval between the world as it was yesterday and whatever it becomes when the clock expires. Every government is watching, every energy market is recalculating, every military command is running scenarios that, until yesterday, remained theoretical. The edge is real. The 48 hours are real. What happens next is not yet written. But the pen is in the hands of people who have already shown, in the last 24 hours alone, that they are willing to write things the rest of the world assumed were permanently off the page.